Leading Britain's conversation, The Nigel Farage Show.
Mr. Nigel Farage.
Thank you, Donald, and good evening, everybody. I'm back in London, where I read the newspaper reports with a kind of sickening familiarity. It's the same again, isn't it? A total of 17 men and 1 woman have been convicted of or admitted to charges including rape, supplying drugs, inciting prostitution, after a series of trials at Newcastle Crown Court. These are underage, vulnerable young women who've been taken to parties in Newcastle, groomed with drugs before being raped and sexually abused. Those prosecuted were from Pakistan, Bangladesh, India, Iraq, Iran and Turkey. And I say sickening familiarity because we've seen this in Rotherham and we've seen it in Rochdale and we've seen it elsewhere. And I have tried myself over the last couple of years to have an honest conversation about it. Indeed, back in 2015, I was in Rotherham, and I was attacked by the local Labour MP, Sarah Champion, for even visiting the town and discussing the Rotherham child abuse scandal. A point of view from which now, today, she's saying something slightly different.
He came here to try and point score, and it's like...
That's what politicians do.
Some sort of voyeuristic tourism that's going on. Well, I don't think that they should, and that's
Really?
why I'm very keen that we address the issue rather than point scoring on it. So the fact that he came here with his circus and has ended up barricaded in his shop with people in Rotherham who are saying this is absolutely disgusting. We don't want you coming and trying to get elected off the back of the abuse that's been going on in our town. I do find that funny because the people of Rotherham know what's right and what's wrong.
So the background of that is I turned up in Rotherham where these stories had been breaking, and a mob with intent on violence, carrying a whole series of derogatory placards and posters, got me effectively locked inside an office until quite a substantial police escort turned up to get me out. She even tweeted, she said, hilarious. Farage is trapped inside the Rotherham UKIP shop by people objecting to him coming to rubberneck at victims. What is it, I was saying, in 2015 that was so objectionable, that was so vile, that was deemed to be racist in every way and, in many ways, promoted me to being public enemy number one? This is exactly what I was saying to Channel 4 News in 2015.
The reason that the blind eye was turned is because race was an issue. Had these offenders been from a different race, I suspect more would have been done earlier. And I think that, that is not an extraordinary thing to say. That is pretty much an accepted fact.
So let's be clear. The crimes that have been committed in Rotherham and in Rochdale, and indeed in this case where we saw the convictions yesterday in Newcastle, are nearly always British-born people, but members of different communities, very often in these northern towns, living in a very segregated, separated way from the rest of the community. And I want to give, my opinion on this is perfectly clear. These are racist crimes. And it's been hidden for far too long in too many northern cities, and a lot of elected political figures throughout the north of England, in my view, bear a very heavy responsibility. But there's been a change of tone, and today Sarah Champion has completely changed course, I'm pleased to say. She makes it clear that predominantly these crimes, and I'm quoting her, not me, come from men who are part of the Pakistani community, and it's a pattern that we see over and over again. And even Sir Ken MacDonald, the former Director of Public Prosecutions, has said today we should now start to look at this as a series of racist crimes. Goodness me, it's taken us years to get to the point where we can even have an intelligent conversation about it. But, it's one thing to identify something ghastly that is going on. It's another, though, isn't it, to try to find a solution to it. And I want to know from you, what can be done? I mean, are there to be a whole series of more cases? Will we find that what we've learnt so far is just the tip of the iceberg? I don't know the answer to that, but I'm certainly concerned, and I particularly want to hear from LBC listeners who are members of those communities. What is the problem? Is it religion? Is it race? Is it to do with economics? Is it to do with the fact that actually in many of these northern cities, the Pakistani community are not actually getting jobs and earning money in the same way that others are? Or is it to do with drugs? Is drugs a major part of this? You know, whenever we've talked about the extremist Islamic attacks, I've made the point again and again that these young men who commit these atrocities, whether it's in Paris or London or Brussels, nearly always seem to be heavy substance abusers. So please, any of you from the Pakistani community, the subcontinent, the Middle East, any of you that have got knowledge on this, please, please call in, use an anonymous name by all means, but we need to try and get to the bottom of not just what the problem is, but what we do to solve it. The number to call is 0345 60 60 973. You can text me on 84850. You can tweet me on @LBC using the hashtag Farage and LBC. And of course, you can watch me on Facebook while I'm here live in London. And our first caller of the evening is Altamish, who is calling in from Stratford. Good evening, Altamish.
Good evening. Thank you for having me on. So basically, I'm calling up to say that the way the media reports on this is extremely racist and Islamophobic. Because if you look at the statistically speaking, both rape and paedophilia is the highest in the Western world. The UK is number 5th, as in the 5th worst country in the world for rape, and the 4th worst country when it comes to paedophilia. So a rapist and a pedophile is more likely to look like you, Nigel Farage, than me. Me being a brown Muslim with a beard from a Pakistani background. Right,
well, Altamish, it's all very interesting, but when I see these cases in Rochdale and Rotherham, and we see other smaller northern cities and now Newcastle, I'm sorry, Altamish, but if you look at, Rotherham particularly, which was on a massive scale, and you see that over 90% of the victims are white English girls from poor working class backgrounds, and that most of those convicted perpetrators, do come from the subcontinent or elsewhere. I mean, are you denying that?
No, I'm not denying it. I'm not saying that Pakistanis or people from the Indian subcontinent don't do it. They do it. But this is an epidemic among the white community, among your community. Right? So the question needs to be asked, what are you doing to stop people from your community? Because that's exactly the sort of questions that people on LBC, like Nick Ferrari and Ian Dale, have asked people from a Pakistani background or Muslim background.
Well, Altamish, if we see...
The media only reports it when Pakistanis do it, or Asians do it. Or
no, that's Altamish. I'm sorry. Actually, the boot's on the other foot, and this is where Sarah Champion at last has caught up with the main party. She says people are too scared of being thought to be racist to delve in to what is going on in some of these northern towns and cities. And actually, it's our fear of racism, fear, or being called racist, our fear at a political level, our fear perhaps even at a police level, that has meant we've gone far too gently on this. And Dennis McShane, who was the Labour MP for Rotherham for many, many years, basically said that. He said, look, it was all a bit awkward. It was all a bit too difficult. So, Altamish, do you, when you look at what happened in Newcastle yesterday, do you accept that these were racist crimes?
Look, you're completely dodging the question because this.
No, I'm not dodging any question. And can I assure you that if a story breaks next week about a group of young white thugs who do exactly the same to young girls from whatever background, I will be the first to condemn it as loudly as I possibly can.
No, you won't, and you have not, because, like I said, Pakistan does not even fall in the top 10 worst countries for rape or paedophilia. The UK does.
Well, perhaps, Altamish, perhaps that's because we deal with it. Perhaps that's because we deal with it, our police deal with it, and our courts deal with it. Perhaps that's, figures can look worse if you're actually dealing with a problem rather than ignoring it. Look, what has been said, Altamish, by some of the people who were convicted yesterday is they view these women as white trash. Surely that's a racist comment.
Right, sure. So clearly you don't understand the gravity of what I'm saying. Maybe some of your other listeners don't. So let me make it explicitly clear. The way you are going about reporting this is as racist as the police catching a couple of black people stealing and then running headlines such as "Black people are thieves. What's wrong with black people? It's something in their culture. They don't understand our way of life."
Okay.
Because that's exactly the things that have been said about Pakistanis and Muslims at the back of this.
So are you saying?
More likely to do it.
I mean, Sarah Champion, who, as I've explained to you in this programme, used to call me all the names under the sun for daring to even discuss this. Sarah Champion now says that, she makes it clear that she sees a problem in the Pakistani British-born community in this country. Are you saying to me that problem doesn't really exist?
I am saying that problem is far bigger in the white community than it is in the Pakistani community.
Altamish, you've given your point of view. If the evidence was there to back it up that there are gangs of white people doing this stuff, then I can assure you there would be no programme on LBC that would shy away from having that debate and condemning it in the strongest possible terms. I thank you for your point of view. I want to hear from you if you're part of the Bangladeshi, Indian, Iraqi, Iranian or Turkish communities also, because you too have been identified in this case. Come and tell me, is there a problem? Or is Altamish right? Actually, is the white population doing this on a huge industrial scale as well that simply isn't getting reported? Right now, you're listening to The Nigel Farage Show, exclusively on LBC, and it's 7:15.
Nick Ferrari at breakfast with Matt Fry on LBC.
Jean-Claude Juncker and top EU officials are accused of spending thousands of euros on private jets. And there's outrage that this is money from your pocket. Let's go to William Dartmouth. He's the UKIP deputy chairman and MEP for South West and Gibraltar.
The European Union is a hugely wasteful and extravagant organisation.
Which is quite happy to pay you your 304 euros a day subsistence.
And you compare my 304 euros a day with 100 billion euros, which the European Union wants us to give away in divorce.
Nick Ferrari at breakfast with Matt Fry every weekday morning from 7, only on LBC.
Now let's get one thing straight. The Vauxhall Vivaro puts in a shift. It's a real van that doesn't flinch at a hefty load. Space to handle the big stuff with up to 8.6 cubic metres of vanliness. Bluetooth and USB connectivity and a range of efficient engines. In other words, it's a real van's van. It's...
Here you go, sir. Your hazelnut and caramel soy latte.
Oh, with sprinkles.
Certainly, sir.
Like I said, a real van's van.
Get van savvy with the Vauxhall Vivaro. Contact your Vauxhall retailer today for a quote.
Are you confused about PPI? At PPI Hotline, we want to give you the facts. There is absolutely every reason to check you had PPI. Even if you think you never have, we can help you find out, as you could be owed thousands. And now there's a deadline. We just need the name of the bank you've had loans or credit cards with, and we'll check for free. So find out now if you're owed by texting WIN to 82222.
PPI Hotline. Text WIN to 82222.
On day 4 of our cruise, we struck gold, exploring Lisbon on a bright yellow tram, munching happily on a pastel de nata. That's a custard tart to you and me. Oporto followed, a beguiling city with a historic heart you can lose yourself in. And we did. Now, after a lip-smacking meal on board, will it be a show, live music or a film? Either way, it'll be an epic.
7 nights from $7.99 per person. Book by the 2nd of October for £100 per cabin to spend on board. P&O Cruises.
This is the life.
Based on N808 NF grade, subject to availability. Conditions and credit card fees apply.
Oh, the holiday was fantastic. You have to see Lola in her tiny sunglasses. Doesn't she look adorable? And this is us at the park. That's her favourite toy, Mr. Bobble. Oh, look at the way she's sleeping in this one. And here she is digging up a bone.
It's a beautiful day.
Pets. They're part of our family and we positively love them. So for those times they're feeling rough, protect them with pet insurance from Pets in a Pickle. Get a free no-obligation quote at petsinapickle.co.uk.
After a long day at work, there's nothing Mark likes more than cooking a stir-fry. What he doesn't like is Gaz and Lecky getting out of control. So Mark's had a smart meter installed. Now he's able to see exactly how much energy he's using in pounds and pence and stir-fry to his heart's content. Only your energy supplier can carry out your smart meter installation, so contact them today.
The Nigel Farage Show. Text 84850.
We, for years, have not been having a sensible conversation about some of the appalling, disgusting abuses that have been taking place in our northern towns and cities. There have been people giving warnings. I said earlier that I was trying very hard to highlight this issue, only to receive abuse. But, you know, Professor Alexis Jay did a report a couple of years ago onto what had happened in Rotherham, and he highlighted the fact that this was an ethnic issue. But he said within the town, the subject was taboo, and local people were probably equally as frightened of the violent tendencies of the perpetrators as the young women they were abusing. So we're talking about grooming gangs. We're talking about the targeting of young, vulnerable girls. We're talking about them being plied with alcohol, but perhaps more importantly, drugs. And whilst all this was going on, and whilst I was trying to actually have a debate about this issue in the north, something else happened in Rotherham that showed me just how completely skewed the priorities were of local politicians in the north of England. Because what happened was there were two people living in Rotherham, foster parents, professional foster carers, and it came to light that they were UKIP supporters. And as a result of this, the local council adjudged that UKIP was a racist party. They were worried as to how these people might treat young children who'd come from Eastern Europe, and the children were taken away from them, and this couple have never been put back on the foster carers register, despite for nearly 20 years having been seen to do a good job. The political priorities were all wrong. And yes, I said at the time that I believed that in places like Rotherham, the Labour Party did bear a very heavy responsibility. The priorities were all wrong. You know, just because you support UKIP, you can no longer be a foster parent. And yet, in that one town, 1,400 young girls were abused. So there is a problem. I want to know what that problem is. I want to know what we do about it. And I'm appealing particularly to British-born people in those communities, whether it's Pakistan, Bangladesh, India, Iran, Turkey, all the countries that were cited yesterday. I'm appealing particularly to you to come and talk to me. Now, before the break, Altamish from the East End of London said to me that he thinks the problem is even worse in the white community. But I just haven't seen any evidence of white grooming gangs out there operating on our streets. I'm going to ask Akshay from Wembley. Good evening.
Good evening, Nigel. How are you?
I'm very well. So, Akshay, is there a problem here? Is there an ethnic or religious problem here?
Well, see, the thing is, I wanted to call up and talk about the sort of impact these crimes are having on my community. I'm a British person. I'm a British-born person of Indian descent.
Yes.
I'm a Hindu.
Yes.
And Hindus in the UK, you know, we've been very kind, very benevolent. We've done very well in the UK. We've integrated very well, and we've very, very rarely, seldom ever bothered anyone. If you look at official statistics for those who are in jail in terms of faith and no faith, actually Hindus are less likely to be in jail than any other faith and people of no faith in the whole of the UK. Obviously, there's 1 million Hindus in the UK. So, but what I'm saying is that this issue with these grooming gangs, I mean, they always refer to these grooming gangs as Asian all the time, and so I mean, I don't think that's very helpful to people like myself and my community, because, as I say, we're not involved in this. I mean, you mentioned that there was one person within the Operation Sanctuary, the people that they actually found. Obviously, the people that were in that gang yesterday, one of them was of Indian descent, but only the one. The rest of them, none of them. I mean, the rest of them were not of Indian descent. And let's say you very rarely hear of Indian people and Hindu people getting involved in.
All right. Well, let me take the figures that you've given me, at face value and on trust. I have no reason to disbelieve them at all. What Sarah Champion MP for Rotherham said today was that it was predominantly Pakistani men. So are you actually telling me that this is actually about religion, not race?
Well, I don't think, you know what, when it comes to people who, I mean, these particular issues, I can't put my finger on it. I'm not sure, because let's say I've lived in communities, in a very diverse community. I've lived next door to Muslims for a very, very long time. I'm a pluralist. I'm a Hindu, so I'm a pluralist. I can peacefully coexist with anyone. So I've lived next door to Muslims. I've had next door to my shop is a Muslim. My family business next door is a Muslim business, and they're very, very nice people. And I would never ever expect them to do anything like this. However, what I would say is there is in Islam there is they do say that actually men can actually target women for conversion. So if a woman that is not a Muslim wants to marry a Muslim man, then certainly the woman has to convert to Islam.
So
whether this is a matter of conversion, I don't think.
What
does
target mean, Akshay, exactly?
When I say target, I mean there has been times, previously when you found that there are Muslim men who have targeted non-Muslim women, particularly from the Hindu and Sikh community, and tried to actually get them to convert to Islam. But I don't think it's that commonplace anymore, to be honest with you. I think it's not something that I've seen that frequently. And actually, I'll say the Muslim community. I personally, as a Hindu, we haven't had the best of friendships with Muslims, down the years. However, we actually do get along very well in the UK and also in India as well. And so what I'm saying is that actually calling these people Asian is not helpful, because you're tarring us with the same brush.
Okay, Akshay, you make the point that if I or a news report talks about people from an Asian origin, Akshay's point is that we're putting Hindus into this boat, and he says it's totally unfair. They're the most peaceful, law-abiding group in this country. And I don't know the figures off the top of my head, but I suspect he's probably right. Raheem from Watford, good evening.
Oh, hello, Nigel. I'm a first-time caller.
Welcome.
And thank you. Now, I have been a child protection social worker for over 25 years.
Right.
That's all I've ever dealt with is child protection, and I've dealt with hundreds of these kind of cases. I have placed children, girls in foster cares throughout the country because foster placements quickly break down. And I can tell you that I have carried out literally hundreds of interviews of what used to be known as MOGP, which was Memorandum of Good Practice Interviews, which are now called ABEs. It's where you would interview the girl with a police officer, and I'm talking about boys too.
Yeah.
And what that would do is that you would use that video as evidence when they've been abused. 95% of the time, it actually traumatized me when girls had to go repeat this abuse, and it went nowhere. Why? Because these girls were seen as going to be poor witnesses. They came from dysfunctional families, or the police used to say they're just not going to make good witnesses. So what's happened over the decades? It's emboldened people who were involved in this abuse as seen as this crime is actually a crime which is impossible to enforce, i.e. we're not going to get prosecuted. Now, the authorities are dealing with it. I mean, I can give you examples of where girls were going missing from foster placements, and all the police used to say, well, just record the number plates and the way, these men looked, and that was it. Nothing else happened.
Raheem, were the police... Let me just ask you a question, Raheem, because if we think about relations between different communities in this country, and I mean, I'm old enough to remember the Brixton riots back in 1981, and one of the arguments put is that it was the police's behaviour towards certain communities that had led to that unrest, and the police are always fearful of being accused of being racist. Do you think, in the cases that you saw, that the arguments the police were using about these girls perhaps being poor witnesses, actually what it was really about is the police were scared of going after some of these communities for fear the argument they were a racist organisation would be put?
What I'm going to do, Nigel, is I'm not going to give you conjectures, and I'm not going to give you nothing. I'm going to tell you what I know as facts, because you probably have a lot of people phoning up with them. I'm going to tell you what facts are.
Yep.
Facts are this. When I was doing those Memorandum of Good Practice interviews, we had a dedicated child protection officer sitting with us. It was never about race. We were always told, look, they're just not going to make a good witnesses, or I was told, well, that story didn't seem to make sense about she was with this boy and then she was with another boy. Oh, and she's just broken down another foster placement. So her behaviour is going to be seen as highly volatile. Now, what I'm telling you is my own, and I can tell you one thing, Nigel. I've remained in front line of trying to help these girls, and it's actually broken my heart a lot of times because they already come from broken homes. Now, the earlier gentleman you had on, I've dealt with Pakistanis, I've dealt with Sikhs, I've dealt with Hindu men, all kinds of abusers, and the problem is now that it's catching up now because police and authorities are having to deal with it. Even social workers, when we've done the interviews, we had no say. The interview was done. It went off to the Crown Prosecution Service or to the police. That was it.
But Raheem, you've lived with this.
And what we were doing...
You've lived with this, Raheem, for 25 years. And I have to say, I wouldn't want your job for all the tea in China. I couldn't do it. But you've lived with this, and you've said on this phone call that at times it breaks your heart to see what's happening. But most of us in the population were wholly unaware that this was going on until 2 or 3 years ago. And I promise you, there are tens of millions of people out there who are absolutely shocked and horrified at the scale of what has gone on. Can you just give me one positive thing, change in the law, change in procedures that you think could be put in place to make this better?
Well, let me tell you one thing that would make a huge difference. And I can tell you something. I know. Let me give an example. I know a person who was never prosecuted. I'm going back about 25 years ago, and he's recently been prosecuted about 5 years ago, and he's been sent to prison. Because he was never prosecuted, within those 20 years, he fathered over 20 children from vulnerable women. Women with severe learning difficulties, because he targeted day centres.
Yeah.
Now, one of the things that would make a huge difference is when we used to do these interviews that we didn't have somebody saying, well, maybe they're good witnesses or maybe not. No. Let it go before the courts. Let them make the decision whether...
Regardless whether they're seen to be good witnesses or not. No, I understand that, Raheem. I thank you very much for that point and for your call and for your expertise. And I wish you, as I'm sure everybody listening to this show does, I wish you well with everything that you do. You're listening to The Nigel Farage Show, exclusively on LBC. It's 7:30 and time for the news with Moira Alderson.
The National Crime Agency is warning that modern-day slavery and human trafficking are rife in the UK, with cases in every large town and city. Officers estimate there are tens of thousands of victims, with many sexually exploited or forced to work for nothing. North Korea says a plan that could see it fire missiles towards the US territory of Guam will be ready in a matter of days. The state has denounced Donald Trump's warnings of fire and fury and says the American president is bereft of reason. Police have questioned a 50-year-old man after a runner appeared to push a woman into the path of an oncoming bus in southwest London. He's now been released after being arrested on suspicion of causing grievous bodily harm. LBC weather, a dry night ahead for much of England and Wales, turning wet and windy in Scotland and Northern Ireland later, an overnight low of 12 degrees.
LBC Travel. Well, starting off in Surrey, the M23 is queuing northbound from Junction 9 for Gatwick up to the M25 because of an accident on the entry slip to the clockwise M25, which has left the slip road partially blocked. In central London, Oxford Street in the West End is queuing on both approaches to Bond Street Station because of an ongoing police investigation, leaving delays from Marble Arch and from Oxford Circus. This has also seen Bond Street Station shut. In Cambridgeshire, the A1 is down to just one lane southbound to recover a serious collision, which has caused all four queues between Stamford and Peterborough all afternoon. And then in West Yorkshire, the M1 is closed northbound at junction 47 for Garth Forth. That's to deal with a tanker which is overturned. Onto the rails, Heathrow connector suspended between Paddington and Heathrow, and Great Western Railway are delayed by around 15 minutes. LBC Travel, I'm Andy Lake.
This is LBC.
It was hard for me to talk about the fact that I got out of breath easily. I tried to hide it. I began to carry less at work, and I just thought it was down to getting older. I wish I'd gone to the doctors earlier, because now it's even harder for me to talk about it.
Getting out of breath doing things you used to be able to do could be a sign of lung or heart disease or even cancer.
Finding it early makes it more treatable, so don't ignore it. Tell your doctor. Be clear on cancer.
Does your career need a kickstart? If so, Saturday the 12th of August could be the most important business meeting you ever go to. Henley Business School is holding its final MBA preview day for programmes starting this autumn. It's your chance to get a taste of studying at a highly respected, triple accredited business school right on your doorstep. Join us on the 12th of August to find out how the Henley MBA can give you the skills, knowledge and experience to be the leader you know you can be. Search Henley MBA and book your place today.
Are you confused about PPI? At PPI Hotline, we want to give you the facts. There is absolutely every reason to check you had PPI. Even if you think you never have, we can help you find out, as you could be owed thousands. And now there's a deadline. We just need the name of the bank you've had loans or credit cards with, and we'll check for free. So find out now if you're owed by texting WIN to 82222.
PPI Hotline. Text WIN to 82222.
Get up to £100 trade-in for your old mattress. In the Houses Bed and Mattress Sale, plus up to £200 extra off our ticket prices. Free local delivery, free mattress protector, even a free pair of pillows. Get a perfect night's sleep with our best ever offers. Hamses Sleep Centres, Beckenham, Bexley Heath, Leatherhead, New Malden and Wallington, and hamses.co.uk. Conditions apply.
Moving house, nightmare. I need a plasterer, plumber, electrician, builder, painter, locksmith, gardener, and somebody to move my valuables, the drinks trolley. Relax, relax. It's Trust a Trader. They have all the tradespeople you can think of, reputable and reviewed, so you always get a job well done. Well done me, I say, for getting it all sorted. I shall reward myself with a cheeky tipple from the trolley. Chin chin, pass me the gin. Visit trustatrader.com.
The Nigel Farage Show on LBC.
Well, it's a discussion I think that's been had up and down the land. Yet another horrendous grooming case of young underage girls who were severely sexually abused, and in a real change of tack, the Labour MP for Rotherham now saying this is predominantly Pakistani men that are doing it, and it's happening time and time again. And I'm asking you, why is this happening, and what do we need to do to stop it? But we can't ignore the fact that, of course, the North Korean-US standoff is worsening. In terms of rhetoric and words. And today, North Korea have said that they've got a plan that could see them firing 4 missiles near the US territory of Guam in a matter of days. Guam, little Pacific island, 163,000 people. It is home to the US long-range strategic bomber force, and they are right in the middle of all of this. I think people there right now are terrified. In response to this, and not so much Donald Trump today, but US Secretary of Defense Jim Mattis has said that Pyongyang would be grossly overmatched in any war against the US or its allies. What's going to happen? I don't know. Are we dealing with a reasonable actor in the case of Kim, or are we dealing with a maniac? He looks pretty much like a maniac to me, but he must know that with Trump and Mattis having gone as far as they have, if missiles were fired that landed close to Guam or on Guam, it'd be very difficult, wouldn't it, for the Americans to simply do nothing, having raised the stakes as high as this. So let's hope I'm wrong, and let's hope Kim Jong-un actually is a rational actor. Now, we continue this debate, a debate that it's been very difficult to have over the years, a debate that I did my utmost to try and help get moving a few years ago, only to receive abuse and threats of violence against myself. But we are beginning to talk about it. And I'm going to ask Bally in Warwickshire what she thinks. Good evening.
Good evening, Nigel. Most pleased to finally speak to you.
Well, thank you very much.
I would have to agree with Akshay to somewhat. I'm surprised we're so slow in handling and sick to death of playing the race card. I am not Pakistan. I am Indian.
Yep.
And what I have seen, it's almost like white women are quite free to do all those sexual acts, drugs, alcohol. One of their own kind is far too good or superior to do that. Have you noticed, Nigel, there are no Pakistani girls that are being groomed?
No, and I wonder, Bally, is that because they don't roam the streets at night and they're not prone to drugs and alcohol, or is it because the crimes that are being committed are actually racist in their very nature?
It's nothing to do with the race. To do those sexual acts, it would have to be someone who has low self-esteem, someone who is quite easy, free, when you're showing them a nice car, a man showing them affection, Nigel, in a very sports car, nice things, nice clothes, showing a girl a good time.
Mm-hmm.
Straight away, when a younger girl has a lower self-esteem, they are going to think, this man really cares about me. He loves me. Once they got that confidence, that's when they're passing around.
I mean, that's exactly the tactic that is used.
Of white women is almost like quite low. Our Asian women are far too superior to do.
Superior?
Therefore,
so hang on, Bally. Are you actually saying to me that Asian girls are superior to white girls? Is that what you're saying?
No, absolutely not. This
Good.
is what they're thinking, Nigel.
Right.
And this is where you're seeing majority of the girls being groomed in white.
Yeah.
I am myself sick to death. When is this country going to stop walking on eggshells? You can't say this because Pakistani, it's the race card. No. Whether we like it or not, I'm sorry, they are Pakistani men, therefore they are doing the grooming. This thing about ratio-wise, it is the white, but it seems to be the Pakistani men are that always brought up. No, I'm sorry. Oxford, Rotherham, Leicester, Newcastle...
You may well be right, Bally. You may well be right in saying that there are white working-class girls coming from broken homes and poor backgrounds who have loose morals and are tempted by drugs and alcohol, and you may very well be right in saying those things. However, none of that excuses the targeting, the grooming and the crimes. I get on Twitter. Right now, Nigel Farage is trying to get the UK to think that paedophilia only exists among Muslims. Oh, please. That's not what we're saying at all. But what we are saying is there is a depressing familiarity about case after case coming to court in big northern towns and cities. And we want to find out why and what can be done. Your average paedophile doesn't share his victims with his friends and family because they'd get arrested. It's a different mindset, I get on Twitter, and that is referring to different racial groups, different ethnic groups, different religious groups within this country. If an 18-strong white British paedophile rape gang were convicted, it would be the top news item for the BBC for weeks, I get. And I get disappointed at Caller segregating his society from ours. Surely it's one British society and one set of standards and behaviours. Well, Shirl on Twitter, I tell you, that's what it should be. And actually, if previous governments of both shades had managed immigration policy into this country sensibly, had not pursued state-sponsored multicultural division and actually integration, I don't think we'd be in anything like the mess we are with this right now, today. And I believe that very, very strongly. Pauline in Stratford, my next caller. Good evening.
Nigel, hi. I've got a lot to say on this, actually.
Well, just restrict it to 2 or 3 points, Pauline, because lots of other people want to have their say too.
Yeah, okay. Well, I think that this is a Muslim male problem, and this isn't a race problem. It's not an Asian problem. I think it's a problem that exists in Muslim males who are in the West, particularly, because they're surrounded by non-Muslims, particularly white women, who they view as being morally inferior to them.
Why, Pauline, Pauline, why is it Muslim specifically in your opinion?
Why? Because look at their backgrounds. They're Pakistani, they're Iraqi, they're Somalians, they're from Bangladesh.
Right.
Even the Indian, I'm sure that the Indian was probably a Muslim Indian. There are some Muslims in India, but they are coming from Muslim countries.
Right, and what do you see? What do you see as the problem with that list of Muslim countries that you've just read out?
Well, it's not anything specific to the country, but I live in Stratford, which is a really multi-ethnic, really multi-faith area, and I've lived here for 40-odd years, and I've grown up seeing this. Even as a teenager, this mindset that exists in Muslim males, that doesn't usually lead to the extreme of Rochdale and Rotherham, but nevertheless, there's a mindset that exists within Muslim males that white girls are there only for sex. And so even as a teenager, you'd see teenage white girls dating Muslim guys, and white girls fall in love with them. The Muslim guys only are interested in sex and nothing else.
But is it, are you, Pauline, are they, okay, I'm sort of taking your premise that it's a male Muslim problem. Who is encouraging them to think like this?
They don't need the encouragement. They're living in the West. They're surrounded by Western TV. That's all. It's focusing on white women wearing skimpy clothes. They only have to walk out on the street and they see women who are not covered up. Not to mention pornography, magazines, music videos. Everything is all about sexualizing women. And in the West, we've come to accept this. This is the norm now. But for men who are coming from this culture where women cover up, and if you don't cover up, then you're a slut, you're a whore, and you're worthy of being defiled.
Pauline.
They only marry within their own. So these men will only marry a Muslim woman.
If you're right, Pauline,
sex with white women.
If you're right in putting your finger on the problem as you see it, what on earth would you do about it?
I don't know, but I've come across in my area in London convictions of groups of Somalian guys gang raping white girls. This is a common phenomenon that happens all over London, where you've got gangs, or not necessarily gangs, but you've got Muslim guys exploiting, abusing young white girls. They don't do it to their own. They don't even do it to black girls. It's only white girls that they do it to because they see them as like the lowest of the low.
Pauline, I thank you for your points, your passion. Pauline feeling very, very strongly there. She believes it absolutely is a male Muslim problem. I want to hear what the rest of you think. You're listening to The Nigel Farage Show, exclusively on LBC, and it's 7:45.
Coming up at 8 on LBC, Clive Bull.
The number of homeless people is set to double in the next 2 decades, according to Crisis, and rough sleeping will quadruple. So is the government's housing policy to blame?
Clive Bull on LBC.
Hi, I'm Michael Owen and I know what it's like to be injured. If you've been injured and it's not your fault, you need to speak to Gowing Law. Text WIN to 80800 and Gowing Law will do the rest.
Thanks, Michael. If you've been injured on the road or at work, Gowing Law could help you win thousands in compensation. We can tell you instantly what you might be owed. Find out right now and text WIN to 80800.
Dele Alli on a mazy run here inside the Liverpool half, and then he guides the ball effortlessly beyond the Australian fielders and should make it back for 2 on this glorious Ashes Day in Melbourne. Oh, but then Dele takes a big punch on the chin from Anthony Yard. The title's not his yet. And then with an audacious move, the Spurs man overtakes Valentino Rossi to lead. Incredible!
42 live Premier League games, exclusively live UEFA Champions League, the Ashes in Australia, Championship Boxing, MotoGP and more. Be there. BT Sport.
Divorce. It threatens the things you've worked hard for in more ways than you can imagine. Your home, savings, pension, and most of all, your relationship with your children. Don't let divorce cost you any more than it has to. Cordell & Cordell is dedicated to helping men in matters relating to divorce. Call now on 0330 60 60 161 or visit cordellcordell.co.uk, office in central London. A partner men can count on.
We've been thinking about pruning. Not your peonies or your privet, but your cost of living. And how, from broadband to mobile phones, These days, we're all looking for ways to trim our spending. And then we thought, couldn't we help you cut back on your biggest outgoing? And we thought, yes, we could. So we'll always try to help you remortgage to a better rate and save on your monthly repayments. Mortgages for how life is now. NatWest. We are what we do.
Your home may be repossessed if you do not keep up repayments on your mortgage.
Your future is here. The Global Academy in Hayes is a state school for 14 to 19-year-olds interested in a media career. Find out more at globalacademy.com.
Did you know you can now get travel alerts as they happen with our Twitter push notifications? We'll send all the latest Tube, DLR, London Overground and TfL rail information straight to your Twitter account. So now you can be as up-to-date with your travel network as you are with your social one. Search TfL Improvements. To the Mayor of London and TfL, every journey matters.
Take your taste buds on holiday this week with Lidl's Spanish range. Get tortillas in a variety of flavours for only $1.99. A bottle of Moscatel wine just $5.99. And 2 orange or lemon sorbets for only $2.49. Mucho bueno. Hurry down to Lidl for the full Spanish range. Subject to availability and may vary selected stores while stocks last.
The Nigel Farage Show on LBC.
Another depressing court case, another 18 people convicted of serious paedophile crimes, and a Labour MP, one who previously didn't want to discuss this stuff very much, now saying that this is a problem predominantly of the Pakistani community. And I'm asking you, is this issue about race? Is it about religion? Is it about division, poverty within our cities? Is it even about drugs? I'm going to ask Sidra in Reading what she thinks. Good evening.
Hi, Nigel.
Hello.
I'm a first-time caller.
Welcome.
So I'm a young Pakistani Muslim woman myself.
Yeah.
And I completely agree that we have a serious problem with misogyny within our communities. There is obviously a problem there with young Muslim men of Pakistani origin thinking that they can abuse women as they like, do whatever they like to women. But I don't think that it's a religious problem. I think it is a cultural problem with men being brought up to think that, women are, second-class citizens to them. That's
why would that happen?
An Islamic problem.
Sidra, why would that happen then in an Islamic community? By the way, we're talking about British-born people here. But why would that problem happen in an Islamic community but not happen in a Sikh community or not happen in a Hindu community? Why?
Yeah, because culturally that's just how it is. Islamically, women are not second-class citizens, whereas culturally within the Pakistani community, women are treated like they're not, proper people sometimes. I think that's just an issue that we have in our communities. But the other angle that I wanted to bring to this was you were discussing earlier on how it's it's specifically white women who are being targeted in this. That's absolutely not true. There have been cases out there documented in which it's Pakistani women who are targeted, Afghan women who are targeted, so Muslim women themselves. And I think that's down to the fact that it's not just white girls or black girls or Asian girls or whatever. It's vulnerable girls in general, and I think that's an important distinction to make. It's not a race issue. It's not Pakistani men hate white women. It's these men are misogynistic.
Well,
they don't like women in general. This is how they treat women, and those women happen to be vulnerable women.
Well, I mean, I do understand the point about vulnerability, Sidra, but it was pretty clear from some of the evidence that was presented in Newcastle Court that actually there were quotes like, these women are white trash. I do genuinely think that with the convictions you got yesterday, that most of what happened in Newcastle, I think, was outright racist in its nature.
See, what I think is that that's just how men perceive white women to be in that way, because that white women are more likely, young white girls are more likely to not be held accountable by their parents. They're not.
Yes, I understand that.
Yeah, so that's kind of a cultural
doesn't make them guilty, though, does it?
It doesn't make them guilty. No. I think it makes the parents guilty. I think it makes white culture in general should be accountable for the fact that you have young girls who are being allowed out at 11, 12, midnight when they're only 13, 14 years old, therefore being put in a situation where there's going to be people who are going to take advantage of them. And as a parent and as a responsible adult who a child is under your guardianship, like, you should not be allowing something like that. That's not something that would ever be allowed in, like, the Asian community. I think that's why these men specifically don't go out there.
We've had a couple of phone calls. We've had a couple of calls on that point. Cedric, you've expressed your own frustration, disappointment, upset at the misogyny that exists within your own community. Do you feel any grounds for optimism that this might get better?
I think now that the conversation has been opened up and people are starting to finally see it and accept it and be open to dialogue, I think that there's room for, moving this forward and coming to solutions. But I think that's the first step in any issue like this, kind of owning it and accepting it and saying, like, yes, we do have a problem within our communities. Let's figure out what the problem is. Let's figure out why it's there, because this isn't a conversation that we've been having. So, for you to ask
time to have it then, isn't it?
What it is.
Yeah, it's time to have it.
Everyone being open and having that transparency and wanting to talk about these things.
Sidra, thank you very much for your call and some very brave comments that you've made there. On Facebook, Dennis says, politicians have caused this. They are to blame. Sweeping it under the carpet. They are keeping very quiet about it. Well, Dennis, they were keeping very quiet about it, or abusing those who wanted to try and talk about it. At least today was something of a conversation going on. Glenn says, Nigel, the problem is communities don't integrate with any other religion except their own. That is the problem. And Sue says, in some cultures, women are seen as the lowest of the low. The women are treated appallingly. These women are too afraid to even come forward. Ironically, if they did, it might help bring about even more prosecutions. And yeah, I mean, that was the point that I had a sort of bit of a set to with Altamish, my first caller today. He said that sexual crime is far worse in Britain than it is virtually anywhere else in the world. I don't believe that. I just think that we're better at actually reporting it, prosecuting it, and dealing with it than many other parts of the world. Ramon from Chingford, good evening.
Good evening, Nigel. Nice to speak to you.
Good to speak to you. Now, so what's the problem? What's the problem and what are we going to do about it?
With your previous caller, I agreed with most of what he said, but I think it's a bit of both. I think it not only is it culturally, it's also religious. I think it's, you can't just say it's Pakistani. I'm British born. My parents are from Bangladesh.
Yeah.
You can't just say Bangladeshi. It's a bit, I think religion has to come into it. Religion and your cultural background has to come into it. So your previous caller said that, yes, in a lot of households in Bangladeshi, Pakistani communities, and I grew up in the 70s, so I've met many people from those communities, women are seen as second-class citizens. It could be because they're seen as a burden term, because they've got to get married off, and the sons and the men in the family are held higher than them. And if you're growing up in a household where you are seen higher as your elder sister, younger sister, then you grow up thinking that you feel superior, and that you will hear comments that, oh, white people are this and white people are that, and then if you grow up...
I've lost you. He was in full flight there, and it was very interesting. And I've lost him. My last caller, Suhail from Bushy. You've got 45 seconds, Suhail, to make your point.
Very simply, I think there is a problem. There is an element of, it's certainly cultural, but there is culture that extends from religion. It's not the religion itself. You have culture, and then you have the culture that is inherited through the religion. I think that's it's a mixture of the two. Yes, I will say I've seen this myself, that I've seen predominantly Pakistani men, but I have also seen Sikh, I've also seen Hindus, and even Turkish. I've come across Turkish people embroiled in the same thing. So I definitely think it's a cultural issue, and we need to own this. All community needs to come forward and stop blaming everybody else, stop being defensive about it. It's our problem. It's our community. We all need to step up to the mark and do whatever we can to eradicate it.
Well, I thank you for saying that, and it's a very positive final call to the evening. So we've had a big range of opinions and some strong passions, but several people ringing in, texting and tweeting saying there is a problem here. within elements of the Muslim community, and it needs to be talked about and it needs to be dealt with. All I can say as a final thought on this is at least we're beginning to talk about it after years and years of it simply being brushed under the carpet, and that was wholly unacceptable, and there are many in our political lives to blame for the awful things that have happened to so many of these young women up and down our towns in the north of England. Now, I said earlier that President Trump had gone quiet on North Korea when I spoke too soon. The US President has just said that his warnings to North Korea have maybe not been tough enough. As tensions between the two countries escalate, Trump has been criticised for threatening to unleash fire and fury if Pyongyang puts America at risk. But now he's added that the secretive state needs to get its act together or it will be in trouble like few nations have ever seen. And remember, I did that interview yesterday with his speechwriter Stephen Miller. You can go to lbc.co.uk and see what he was saying about this issue. You've been listening to The Nigel Farage Show here on LBC. I'm back on Monday.